any preliminary remarks, just remind us that we are in the throes of developing the ARB agency budget for HECC, which has a significant impact on a variety of our partners, especially the community colleges and universities. And we will be spending most of our time today receiving the HECC's recommendation with regards to these different budgets. And so it's a great time for us to dig in a little deeper and better understand our budget situation and kinds of requests that we'll be hopefully putting in front of the governor. And so that's where we're at. And I thank you all for joining us for this. This is a sort of a detailed work around the budget, which then we will provide our understanding and recommendations to the full commission later in this process. So with that, we'll call the roll call.
Thank you, Subcommittee Chair Heyman, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I will now call roll. Greg Heyman.
Present.
Sandy Rowe.
Present.
Rukaya Adams. Emily Simnett.
Present.
Richard Devlin.
Present.
That is roll, Chair, and we have a quorum.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Guthrie. Do you have any review of the agenda? Any questions about this as we dive in? Just to make sure you have a copy of it, of course, and had a chance to take a look at it. I want to make sure that we're ready to move forward. With that, hopefully you've had a chance to review the minutes from the previous F&A meeting, and I'll entertain if you have any questions or comments regarding that those minutes. Hearing none, we could move to approve those minutes. That would be great.
Move for approval. Second.
Second. Thank you, Commissioner Devlin. All in favor? You can say aye or raise your hand or something.
Aye.
Great. Thank you so much. We have approved minutes. We have an opportunity for public comment here, and I believe we have a number of people. Well, maybe I'll just turn it over to Guthrie to say what kinds of written or present public comment we have.
Thank you, Chair Heyman. I will first address our written comments that we've submitted. First on the list, we have a joint written testimony from the Oregon Council of Presidents. That is included as docket material 2.0A, and that is a letter of support for OCOPs, POPs, and LCs, specifically with regard to the Public University Support Fund and the Oregon Opportunity Grant. Next, we have a joint letter submitted on behalf of the Bend Chamber, St. Charles Health System, and Grace Biolabs by Katie Brooks. That is included in the materials as 2.0B, and that is a joint letter of support for the OSU Cascades Student Health Center. Last, for written testimony, we have a submission by former HECC Chair Emeritus Neil Bryant, which is included as 2.0C, and that is a letter of support for the OSU Cascades Student Health Center. That is all we have for the public testimony sign-up. Shall I move into the invited capital request testimony?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Excellent. In that case, I'll just draw your attention to what has been posted as 2.1 written testimony, which is the 2025 to 27 Public University Capital presentation. And I will turn it over to Dana Richardson on behalf of OCOP.
Thanks, Guthrie. Hi, Mr. Chair, subcommittee members. It's nice to see you. I think, are we going to try and screen share the slides? I'll just sit here for a moment and see what happens.
I can, oh, John Martin has it.
Excellent. Okay, I'll get rolling. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Dana Richardson. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Council of Presidents of Voluntary Association of Oregon's Public University Presidents. Next slide, please. We're really pleased to have a little bit of time on your agenda this afternoon to talk about state investments in capital construction at public universities. These investments ensure that our facilities are safe and accessible, that they're designed to meet the needs of current students, faculty, and staff, not students, faculty, and staff who attended 35 years ago, and that they're efficient in terms of the environmental impacts and as well as the costs to operate them. The great thing about investments in capital construction at public universities is often the state investment is matched with institutional funds, so we get a little bit more out of those dollars than we would just as a standalone investment. Next slide, please. So here you see a list of the capital construction projects that have been submitted, but I want to draw your attention to the top line. That is the top priority for all of the public universities, which is a $120 million investment in capital improvement and renewal. These are also known as deferred maintenance funds. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those funds do on our campuses in a moment. If you are becoming accustomed to looking at a ranked list of projects, you'll be confused because this doesn't match this. This is alphabetical, and that's the order that we'll present in. If you could switch to the next slide. I do want to flag for you a couple of revenue bonded projects. So F bonds or revenue bonds are those that are backed by institutional revenue and the university pays for the debt service. So these two F bond requests are from Portland State. The first is a residential building, hence the ability to generate revenue to cover the costs. The targeted space would replace aging resident halls with a 7-story building with ample living space and student lounge and study space. The other project you may have heard about, the Portland, Oregon Center for the Performing Arts. This is a really exciting project that you may have already heard about. This proposal itself is for a 1,200 seat venue and parking that would be in the same facility as a proposal for a larger venue that would replace the Keller Auditorium. So that's why you may have heard about this. Next slide, please. So going back a little bit more to our overall request, and particularly the CI&R funding that we use to maintain buildings and provide high quality education and services in safe and accessible facilities. Nearly half of all of Oregon's capital assets are located on public university campuses. So the CI&R funds that the state invests are really important to us for a thoughtful replacement cycle that helps us maintain our existing facilities and also chip away at a really significant backlog that we have of deferred maintenance on the campuses. The CI&R funds, when they're carefully managed, can help us reduce or even eliminate the need for sometimes more costly replacement or renovation projects. So this chart shows a couple things. It shows for the last 5 biennia, the investments in capital projects at public universities. That's the blue bar at the bottom. And then above that, you see a green bar, and that's the CI&R investment. And when we look over the 5 biennia, that CI&R has averages to 5.5% of the overall state capacity, general obligation bonding capacity. So we went ahead and kind of adopted that methodology. 5.5% of the available GO bonding capacity in the state for 25-27 equals $120 million. So that's how we reached that request amount. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. This is one of my favorites. It gives you a look at some of the vision of some of the projects and some of the current status of some of the facilities. We're so pleased to see in the staff recommendations today that you all are, the staff is recommending support of our CI&R request. And honestly, this commission has always been so helpful and supportive of making sure that we've got safe and effective learning space. So thanks again for your time today. I will turn it over to Auburn from Eastern, and we'll do a quick tour across the public university campuses in Oregon.
All right, great, thank you. Yes, so hello, my name is Auburn Isaac. I serve as the Educational Program Assistant for the Visual Performing Arts at Eastern Oregon University. Give you a little bit of background, I'm also an artist and musician and an alum of the art program at EOU. And I have the privilege of working in Loso Hall, and which is a cornerstone of our campus community. I'm in a position that I'm responsible for assisting faculty and students in our studios, labs, and performance spaces to ensure their safety while helping prepare students for the workforce. Loso Hall was opened up in 1990 after Oregon's biggest recession in history and stands as one of the most utilized buildings on our campus, also catering to the needs of both students and the community at large. However, despite its significance, the infrastructure of Loso Hall is in dire need of attention with our ventilation, our plumbing, electrical, accessibility issues, and space to grow. The daily operating functions in this building definitely do not come without its challenges. In my position, I can assure students are wearing safety glasses, hearing protection, other safety equipment, but I cannot ensure that the most basic aspect, that the air they are breathing is safe and healthy. To give you an example, I have a room that in order to use it and vent the fumes out of the building properly, I have to go turn on 4 vents in 4 different locations within this building. 3 are on the first floor in 3 different rooms. Also, one of those is on an hour timer that we have to go check every hour. And the last one is upstairs. And that just gives you kind of an idea of what we have to deal with to just ventilate to some of our rooms. That leads me to have very minimal faith in the rest of our ventilation system and to keep students, staff, and guests safe. And our students are having to worry way more about the ventilation system than learning the coursework to make them workforce ready. So not only do we have a significant ventilation issue, but plumbing is another barrier that we navigate every day. The events we hold in our lobby area and the theater and music production intermissions are all based around the number of working toilets that we have. And if the sewer system, because the sewer system can back up at any moment with increased usage. So our theater and music students work extremely hard towards projects that give them performance and professional experience. But when our sewer system in Loso Hall fails, we fail our students. By having to cancel and reduce industry standard opportunities needed to set them up for success beyond college. Loso Hall is not just a building for the visual performing arts, but it's a hub for student academic support, from advising to tutoring services and even a food pantry that's integral to our student success. By renovating Loso Hall to fix the infrastructure and expanding the building, we'd be able to accommodate the growing needs of our learning center, disability services, first year experienced students, and improved facilities would lead to increased retention rates, enhanced by student engagement, a higher quality of education. But perhaps the most important issue is to ensure that the basic needs like using a bathroom and breathing clean air are met. So I thank you for this time and opportunity to hear what my daily experiences are within Loso Hall. And for my support for Loso Hall Student Access and Resiliency Project. And now I pass it off to John Harmon from Oregon Institute of Technology. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Rowe. Appreciate the opportunity to present on behalf of Oregon Tech. I'm John Harmon, Vice President for Finance and Administration. Oregon Tech has submitted 2 capital funding projects for consideration, and after the limited capital project funding for Oregon Public University's last biennium, we're looking forward to the opportunity to reduce some of our deferred maintenance. Our first project is the Learning Resource Center renovation for student success. It's a $37 million project on the Klamath Falls campus. This building was built in 1980 and it was damaged in the earthquake in the early 90s. It's not been seismically retrofitted, and its mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are very antiquated. We never renovated this building since the old library days, where we had book stacks and Dewey Decimal System index cards. But libraries are now digital, and this project transforms a 44-year-old concrete building into a welcoming, collaborative learning space supporting student success and an increasingly diverse student body. The renovation would include an expansion to include a Center for Student Success. This is such a critical element of campuses nowadays because these services help improve retention, build academic excellence and student belonging, and help promote a healthy culture for the campus, which is so important to retention for students. Critical student support services, even though we have a number of them, like most universities across the state, they are spread throughout 5 different buildings on campus, so they're not convenient for students, and oftentimes students don't realize some of these services are even in existence until they hear from other students. Gathering these services into a one-stop shop, much like a food court in a mall, essentially, really would help students, and it would also build some synergies for a cross-sharing of information about what these different services can provide before those students even access those areas. Some of those students' success services are familiar probably to you all. They include such core things as admissions, financial aid, and registrar. Those are in 3 different locations on our campus, and the registrar is actually in a basement. It's been there for over 20 years, and it doesn't have windows, so it's a very drab existence in our registrar's office. Also, academic advising and retention, which is so critical as we see challenges in enrollment across the state. Educational partnerships and outreach, which are so essential to our workforce development and partnering. Disability services, of course, a key to all students who experience some sort of mobility challenges. Peer consulting, which is critical to success as students navigate their pathway toward their degree. Veteran services, Oregon Tech is known as one of the stronger veterans-friendly universities in the nation, and we're fortunate to have that student sector within our group, and we want to support those services. They have special needs. Student benefits navigators, which we were so fortunate through the legislature a few sessions ago to get that funded. It's been an integral part of overall I think awareness on campus of students of the types of benefits that are available to them, and it helps us ensure their success. And then things as basic as the student cashier and receivables. So these are all spread throughout 5 different buildings, which creates a lot of confusion for students, but also a lot of back and forth that's needless. We believe this project aligns very nicely with the HECC Strategic Capital Development Plan, which was developed several years ago. And one element of that is welcoming a space for first-generation students and those from marginalized backgrounds to effectively acclimate to and succeed at universities. So again, it's about building that culture and building that awareness for these services and pulling them together. Also, access to programs and facilities necessary to succeed as they pursue their academic journey for economic empowerment. So we feel this is real closely aligned with some of the key goals that HECC has been so forward in thinking about for the success of students. The next project we have is the Seaman Hall renovation and expansion project. This building was built in 1965, and it sure looks it, even though it's clean and well taken care of, it has a number of issues, including not being seismically retrofitted, but also, as you can imagine, a building that old that has never had a complete renovation has serious mechanical, electrical, and plumbing issues. Which can very limited time. Sometimes the building has had to be closed down the last couple of years for serious breakages in those core systems. This building houses one of our most vibrant programs on campus, which is dental hygiene. There's a strong need for dental hygienists across the state. And it also includes the dental hygiene clinic, which is an important pairing with the training and the didactic learning. Students actually work with other providers in this clinic, and they provide free services to a large number of individuals from the community. And in the past, they've worked with such organizations as Cascades Health Alliance to help improve access to some basic preventative health related to dental care. Also, our communications department is there, and humanities and social services and physics. We think this project really supports HECC's long-term strategy of increasing efficiency and effectiveness of existing space and meeting workforce needs. The expansion is really necessary to expand our dental hygiene program, which is in great demand, but we're kind of bottlenecked because we don't have space to expand it, and also to support the development of the new 4-year dental hygiene program. You may remember in the 2021 legislature, Representative Tana Sanchez co-sponsored House Bill 2528. It was later signed into law, and it really triggered Oregon recognizing dental therapists as an essential provider in oral health care delivery. It's much like a nurse practitioner is to a primary care physician. They can provide services such as basic dental services, fillings, extractions. So as you can imagine, Oregon has a very large health profession shortage area as designated by the Health Resources and Services Administration. And dental health is really essential to overall good personal health. The dental therapy program, if we had additional space and could add this program, would address a workforce provider shortage across Oregon in dental care and improve access for primary dental care, especially for those rural areas and underserved communities, and also others that experience barriers to adequate care. In closing, I would say thank you very much. We appreciate everything the commissioners do and your support in the past, and thanks for the opportunity to present. And so I will pass it to Paul Odenthal from OSU.
Thank you, John. Chair Heyman, commissioners. For the record, my name is Paul Odenthal. I'm the Senior Associate Vice President for Administration at Oregon State University. First off, you have the slide there. The heat plant project here at OSU will renovate our historic decommissioned heat plant to make it the home of modern teaching and laboratory space for OSU's Department of Physics. Physics, as you know, is a foundational course for all STEM majors at OSU, and our students will benefit greatly from the creation of these state-of-the-art teaching and learning labs that include laser and optics education, as well as many other specialties that contribute greatly to Oregon's economy. They will both foster innovation and drive growth in key industries for our state. Physics is currently housed in a seismically vulnerable, unconditioned building that has become increasingly unsuitable for modern STEM education. As we transform this historically significant facility that cannot be demolished or used without major renovation, OSU will eliminate $40 million in deferred maintenance while minimizing the need to build new footprint on our Corvallis campus. This project also will modernize the area surrounding, known as Community Place, to create a more accessible, functional, safe, and welcoming space from what is now currently an industrial corridor at a busy main entry point to our campus and close to the front of the campus and the academic area. In total, this project is $101 million. OSU is bringing $28 million to the table and as a match, which exceeds our G bonding requirement of $2.75 million and equates to a total project match of 28% on this project. Moving to over the mountains and to our next slide, to Bend, OSU Cascades currently is the only four-year campus in the state without a facility dedicated to student health and wellness. I think we all know these type of facilities are not amenities, but are essential to promoting student health and student wellness and success. Not surprisingly, this has been a student priority for our students at Cascades for several years, as evidenced by the fact that they've made a substantial student fee-funded commitment to the project. This is also an equity issue. The need is currently addressed for this space by a small hotel-style gym without locker rooms, expensive membership at facilities out in Bend that our students have gone and pursued themselves, as well as counseling spaces that are located in an academic building on the campus. While attempting to address these issues through these measures, the current approach is the least accessible to those lacking transportation, commuting from off campus, and without disposable income for use fees. Another essential part of this project is remediating 7 acres of landfill to buildable land and creation of another 16 acres of re-landfilled spaces that are suitable for roads, parking, and playing fields. Basically using the soil from those areas to create these other sites. The buildable portion of this work will be sufficient for this facility, as well as for an urgently needed student housing project that's in the near future and our future academic buildings at the site. This work will remove approximately $22 million of current liability from the OSU Cascade site. The Student Health and Recreation Center will provide space that will include a variety of physical activity spaces, dedicated spaces for student clinical health services, and dedicated spaces for student mental health counseling. The total project is $84 million. The university is providing $22 million in debt financing, while our students have approved fee revenue that will provide $3.9 million in cash and support $16.1 million in debt financing. This makes a total match of $42 million, or over at 50% of the estimated cost of the project, And I just echo the commitment of our students to join in on this project and the importance that it is to them for their success. In summary, this project is essential for improving access for our students, student retention, and student success. Students in Central Oregon highly deserve the same opportunities that we have at our other Oregon public universities. Thank you for your time today, and I will pass the baton over to Jason Franklin from Portland State.
Good afternoon, Chair Heyman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Jason Franklin, Associate Vice President for Planning, Construction, and Real Estate at Portland State University. Portland State has 2 projects that were submitted for scoring and 1 F-bond project to provide additional student housing on our campus in downtown Portland. Our top priority project is the Portland, Oregon Center for the Performing Arts. Our $85 million Article G bond and $35.5 million Article 11F request supports a once in 100-year opportunity to revitalize downtown Portland, create a world-class asset for our students, and make our city an international arts destination. In July of 23, the city of Portland published a request for expressions of interest to explore the potential of constructing a new performing arts facility as an alternative site to the renovation of the Keller Auditorium. PSU submitted a proposal in August of 2023, interviewed with the city in the fall, and was selected as a finalist among 2 other options. 2 weeks ago, on May 29th, we presented our concept to the Portland City Council. In August, the City Council will determine which of the 3 proposals will be selected. This project allows us to lean into our motto, let knowledge serve the city, and our role as an urban university. PSU's plan brings a 3,000-seat auditorium to our campus to replace the Keller Auditorium, as well as a second smaller venue with about 1,200 seats, education facilities, an outdoor plaza, on-site hotel, restaurants and bars, and a conference center. The PSU-owned 1,200-seat venue and associated academic space will support our College of the Arts, including our internationally recognized choir and jazz programs, along with our opera and band programs. This is the portion of the project that we submitted through HECC's capital scoring process. Despite the uniqueness and relative complexity of our project, we submitted the project for scoring through the HECC out of respect for the biennial process of ranking university capital projects. That said, we appreciate the recognition of the unique nature of this project by HECC staff. It is truly a once in 100-year opportunity for our institution and region. The cost of building a new 3,000-seat theater is significant, and we expect the Portland City Council will provide additional direction on funding for this portion of the project later this summer. As I mentioned, PSU is seeking Article G bonds for the PSU academic spaces and 1,200-seat venue, and Article F bonds for parking. We have already been in discussions with legislative leaders about this project of statewide significance. In addition, we have had positive discussions with hotel investors and operators about a new hotel and conference center at the site. At PSU, we're extremely excited about this project and believe in its ability to serve our students and our city. Next slide, please. The second project submitted by PSU is the Millar Library Deferred Maintenance and Renovation Project. This is an $80 million capital request for the renovation of our campus learning hub. PSU seeks to further enhance our only library by making it a more attractive, efficient, and welcoming learning environment for all of our students. Libraries are no longer home just to individual quiet study and books, but now house group study space, remote learning opportunities, tutoring centers, maker spaces, cafes, computer labs, and much, much more. It is really important to note that we submitted this request prior to the occupation of our library in late April. The Millar Library building sustained over $1 million in damage in the occupation. The library is closed to all users and library staff while repairs are underway. We do expect the library to reopen to students and community members by fall term. An essential element to the Millar Library renovation is the replacement of its mechanical systems. As it currently stands, there's approximately $45 million in deferred maintenance within this facility. There are existing systems within the library that are more than 30 years old and have certainly exceeded their useful life. This includes replacement of HVAC, electrical, domestic booster pumps, fire alarm systems, as well as elevator modernization. This renovation project would eliminate this deferred maintenance backlog through the installation of new mechanical systems, which would help the institution achieve operational efficiencies, cost savings, and deliver a comfortable environment to everyone who uses the library. This capital request highlights the importance of transforming and innovating within the PSU's library space to increase the success of its students' population and ensure that graduates are well trained to meet Oregon's workforce needs. One final note, we are not planning to advocate for two capital projects during the 2025 legislative session. If selected by the city, our $85 million general obligation bond request for the Portland, Oregon Center for the Performing Arts will be our top priority. If the city moves in another direction, we will substitute the Millar Library project as our top priority for the session. Thank you for your time today, and our team is certainly happy to answer any questions. I would now like to turn it over to Casey Shillum at Southern Oregon University.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Heyman, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Casey Shillum, and I am the Provost and Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs at Southern Oregon University. We are very excited to present SOU's Creative Industries and Student Success Center project, which was ranked as the #2 university-specific project by HECC staff in their review process. This project is a comprehensive reflection of SOU's values of innovation, leadership, and culture. Our nationally recognized digital and creative industries programs are in large demands by students and respond to greater Oregon workforce trends. This project will allow us to serve more students, to expand further this industry in the region, and to put the state of Oregon in the spotlight nationally as a leader in film, digital cinema, and arts, music, theater, and production. This project also provides the opportunity for additional outreach and added value for our Southern Oregon community, specifically related to a music hall that is the only one of its kind and capacity in the entire region for our community members. At 62,000 jobs in Oregon and growing, creative industries is an important part of Oregon's economic future. By expanding SOU's Digital Media Center, we will increase the number of students who can be trained in these fields and enhance the quality of our education, ultimately bringing an elevated student experience and expanding the reputation of our programs. Our Student Success Center will afford us the capacity to provide greater services focused on student retention, addressing the important HECC performance measure of the 6-year graduation rate.
Good afternoon. I'm Leon Crouch, Director of Facilities Management and Planning here at Southern Oregon University. Not only is Creative Industries Student Success a project that's good for students and the community, it's good for SOU and higher education's financial sustainability. We believe by expanding the Digital Media Center and providing an opportunity for more students to enroll, we can increase the university tuition revenue. A revamped music center will create a better and more compelling environment for community members to purchase tickets for both SOU and industry-led performances. This increase in performance capacity will draw more people to campus and engage SOU and our students with the community and faculty. Finally, this project will remove about $27 million of deferred maintenance costs from the system. These deferred maintenance items are similar to what all of our colleagues have already talked about. It's a 54-year-old building with inadequate HVAC. That's the primary system that we hear the most about, but the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing, accessibility, life safety, it's all there. It's an original 54-year-old building. As you can see on the slide, we estimate the project to be at $43 million. We're asking for $40.1 million from the state, and we have matches here at SOU of about $2.5 million. SOU has a track record of completing our capital projects on time and within budget, and we will do that with this project. We're excited to move this project forward from concept to approval and finally to implementation.
And we just want to thank you again for this opportunity to present the project. And we will now turn this over to Jamie Moffitt at University of Oregon.
Chair Heyman, commissioners, for the record, my name is Jamie Moffett, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration at the University of Oregon. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you today about our proposed project, which is the Child Behavioral Health Building on our Northeast Portland campus. This is a really important project for us as it will house two key initiatives that are focused on a very important issue around children's mental health and the mental health crisis that we're seeing across the state and quite frankly across the nation. So the two programs that we're planning to house in this building, the first one is the Ballmer Institute for Children's Behavioral Health. And that is a new program that we're launching with the generous support of donor family to really focus on the mental health crisis that we're seeing. And this program is going to have multiple components. There will be an undergraduate program, which is a 4-year program that will allow students to either start at a community college at one of our partners or on our Eugene campus, and then finish their final 2 years on the Northeast campus, where they'll do a tremendous amount of clinical experience working with children in the K through 12 school system. And so the undergraduate component of this will actually be kind of creating a new career path for students that are interested in helping with the mental health crisis and being able to do so after just completing a bachelor's degree instead of having to go all the way through with a master's degree or a PhD. On the graduate side, we've already launched a micro-credential program where we're offering training to teachers. And the idea is to provide a program so that teachers in the K through 12 school system can get access to the latest research on interventions and tools and techniques that they can use to address mental health issues that they're seeing and behavioral health issues that they're seeing in their classrooms right now. So that's the first program that we plan to house in the building. The second program is our Prevention Science Institute, which is a research unit that's been around actually for decades. And they focus on conducting research and providing services to families around child development and behavioral health issues. And so by combining these two programs together in this building, we feel that it will be just a wonderful opportunity to both provide new educational opportunities for undergraduate students, as well as provide service to the community and to the K through 12 school systems, which are really suffering in terms of the issues that they're facing. When we originally looked at this program, we were planning to house it on some of the existing facilities on the Northeast campus. You're actually looking at a picture of one of them. When we got into the design, however, we found that there was just a tremendous amount of work that needed to be done with these facilities. There's a lot of deferred maintenance, there's asbestos, there were just a ton of structural issues that made it very, very challenging and not cost effective to actually try to renovate those facilities. And so the proposal that you have in front of you is a two-part proposal. It involves taking down 4 existing buildings and the aged facilities and the deferred maintenance associated with them, and then building a facility that will house these two important initiatives. And so that is what I have for you today. We're very excited about this. We think it can make a real difference in terms of both educational opportunities for students, as well as the impact on our school system across the state. Thank you. I am going to be passing it off to my colleague from Western Oregon, Jason. And Jason, I apologize, I'm butchering your last name, Krazik. He's going to now tell you how to properly pronounce his last name.
Good afternoon, Chairman here, Members Committee. Thank you, Jamie, for that. I actually just sent you a feverish email saying, don't worry about just calling me Jason, and I apologize for my Polish last name. But thank you very much for the introduction. For the record, my name is Jason Krazik. I'm with Western Oregon University. I'm the Director of Campus Planning and Construction, and I'm here today to present to you the 2025-2027 biennium capital projects. Western finds itself at a critical junction as the oldest public university. Many of our buildings reflect this, and especially in the arts. They are outdated, lack modern mechanical and electrical systems, and they simply have a higher cost to operate. We spend a lot of money on maintenance and IT, and that's one of the key elements there, is that with these projects, we hope to bring down our overall deferred maintenance cost. Today, I'll be outlining 2 essential projects that will address these urgent needs and ensure the continued success and growth of our university and our surrounding community. The first project I'll be presenting is the Performing Arts Renewal Project. This project focuses on a complete remodel of the Smith Music Hall and a significant accessibility upgrade to the Rice Auditorium. Smith Music Hall will be rebuilt to will be rebuilt to include a proper performance space, classrooms, practice rooms, and adequate faculty office space. This will transform an outdated music hall into a powerful mechanism to recruit new students to the campus. Meanwhile, Rice Auditorium will be modernized to ADA compliance. We will add a better black box theater and better develop the scenery, costume shop, and classrooms that are already in the lab and expand them so that they can meet today's modern needs. These improvements will dramatically enhance the student experience in our theater, dance, and music programs, and will help us to attract top-notch faculty and students and ensure a vibrant cultural environment on the campus for years to come. The new project will enhance community engagement by providing high-quality performance space for both campus and community events. We will also be eliminating $830,000 in deferred maintenance and ensure that everyone can enjoy the space, whether they're an audience member or a performer, and properly access it. Next slide, please. Our other priority is a new state-of-the-art data center to replace our current inadequate facility. This new facility will improve operational efficiencies, reduce maintenance costs, and provide a reliable, secure environment for our data needs. It will support critical university operations. The addition of Emergency Response Center will enhance our capabilities to serve the campus effectively and our regional community in case of an emergency. We recently dealt with this a couple months back when the Central School District had a cyber attack. When we hear the words Emergency Report Center, often our minds conjure up earthquakes, forest fires, and natural disasters. This area can be used for more than just that. When a cyber attack happened on the Central School District, we were able to set them up with an area that they could work from. Teachers began to get their classes and lessons plans back online, and the school was open a week later. This is the kind of thing that we like to help out the community with, and this new center will allow us to provide that. We are also working with free tax consultants for our student, and this will just be a good place that everyone can come, have computers and stuff on standby and be able to use. These projects are not just about buildings. They're about our commitment to our students and our local community. By investing in the WU Data Center and the Programming Arts Renewal, we are addressing crucial infrastructure needs. We're ensuring compliance with safety and accessibility standards and supporting the arts and technology that are vital to our educational mission. We have reached the breaking point where these updates are not just necessary, but essential for our continued growth and success. Western Oregon urges you to support these proposals to help us create a safer and more efficient and inspiring environment for our students, faculty, and the community. I thank the committee for the time today.
And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you to all of you. It is great to be able to get a better understanding of the various project requests at your institutions. And I really appreciate that. I know both Chair Rowe and myself have had an opportunity to be on some of these campuses as recently as this week and last week. And so we've seen some of these projects. And I think it's just great to be able to better understand your institution's interest in bettering your capacity to serve our students. So I thank you for these presentations. So I'd like to open up for questions. Commissioners? Commissioner Devlin?
There, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
This is a question for specifically to OSU for the Western campus, the Bend campus. I know the reference to a few years that this project has been before us. I think I even remember this project from when I was in the legislature. How many times has it actually been before the legislature? And have the students been paying these increased fees for any period of time? I believe they have.
So I can't give you an exact date. It has been in our plans before to the legislature, and definitely in our long-range vision for the campus, our master plan that dates to our first days moving to this campus as well. The student fees, the students voted on that themselves some time ago, and so it has been a matter of collection for this, as well as the Student Success Center that they have a portion of as well.
So I just wanted to get on record that they've been paying for this for a number of years without the facility being built. So
Thank you. Do we have other questions? Yes, Commissioner Simnett.
Thank you, Vice Chair Heyman. This is more of a comment than well, it is a comment rather than a question. I just want to say that as somebody who works on a university campus, public university campus, and frequents buildings where deferred maintenance is an issue, I really, I've had firsthand experience with issues that come up, and I really appreciate all of the thorough presentations that look both at costs, but also the impact on students and the surrounding community when there's an opportunity to improve the space. It really makes a difference if you have a place where you can breathe air that doesn't make you feel like you're getting ill and use facilities. So just thank you to everyone for your detailed presentations.
Do you have other questions? Dana, I'll direct this one to you, but I note that typically you use a combination of Article 11Q and F bonds and G bonds. And I was just wondering, in my worldview, we always use G bonds to the extent that we've had matching funds, but that isn't the case in all of your projects. I'm just wondering if you have kind of a general sense of how the institutions decide which funding modality to use in their projects?
Honestly, there are folks on the line that could answer that better than I, but what I would say in general, it really does depend on if you've got an option to really get some matching funds and the level to which you can secure those. But I defer to certainly people like Paul or Jamie or Jason. Like I say, we've got a bunch of experts on who might want to add to that.
Yeah, it's fine. I was just thought that, you know, you could be the start point of this conversation. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I might answer this from past experience, generally, it is hard to get donations to renovate a building. Large donations that come from individuals or corporate entities usually relate to building a new facility. So that's been commonly where you'd use a G bond where you could get a substantial match. And for the basic remediation, you're going to have to use a Q bond probably. And in many cases for renovation, overall, you're going to have to use probably a Q bond. F bonds have never been an issue at the state. They're pretty well screened and they depend upon the revenue being generated by the facility. So I don't think we've ever had an issue with an F bond that's been significant in terms of repayment.
Thank you, Commissioner Devlin. Anyone else to help clarify that? Great. Well, I appreciate that. Any closing comments, Dana? Yes. I think we're done. Thank you so much, all of you, again, for helping us to better understand these projects. Really appreciate the time you've given to this. So we'll move on to the HECC agency request budget development. I believe Executive Director Cannon will be the person to kick this off.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, commissioners. Thanks, Chair Heyman, and I'll be joined as necessary by our Director of Operations, Tom Reel, who's really spearheading the work to develop the staff recommendations on the agency request budget and present that to you. This is actually a really important meeting of the subcommittee, this June subcommittee meeting, because we are really at the apex of our Commission's work and our agency's work in the development of the agency request budget. I'll spend a few minutes this afternoon talking a little bit more about that process, where we are and where we're headed. and I'll provide an overview of the emerging staff recommendations for the ARB. And then I'll be followed by a series of HECC staff. You see this on the agenda as they present on some of the ideas that are reflected in that long list of policy option packages that you saw initially last month and are again in front of you today. And so we'll get into the meat of it, including the prioritization of the capital recommendations. And you just heard from the universities their list, and later on this afternoon you'll hear from Jim Pinkert on our staff about how the staff has rated and evaluated those capital projects and reflected those in a prioritization list that you'll have the opportunity to comment on before advancing in August. All right, so again, let me step back to process. So this is familiar for most, or if not all of you, but I'll just quickly note that the development and adoption of an agency request budget is the first stage in the multi-stage and long process that will eventually culminate in the adoption by the legislature of a budget for the 2025-27 biennium, and upon the governor's signature, that becomes the state budget for the upcoming 2-year period. Unlike most other state agencies, for the HECC, the law requires the commission to adopt through a public process that involves after hearing from partners like colleges, universities, students, faculty, workforce organizations, community organizations, and others whom you've heard from over the last several months, that you are responsible for adopting and approving our agency request budget. The governor, in turn, and by December 1st of each even number year, produces a governor's recommended budget that has to be balanced to the expectation of available revenues, and that is presented to the legislature by agencies and the governor during the legislative session. The legislature, of course, writes its own budget, right, which may borrow from the governor's budget, may ignore other portions of it, but is ultimately, to some extent at least, negotiated with the governor in order to get her signature and final passage. So this is early stage. And we, as you know, through this commission and at the staff level, have been hard at work on this for a number of months. The process this year has been somewhat different under Governor Kotek, and really the simplest way of describing that is that we've worked much more closely with Governor Kotek's office over the last several months to develop these staff recommendations and to reflect in them her expectations for agencies about an agency.
Mark and I were just texting. Then Mark just got his new car.
Apologies, Director Cannon. I've muted all, and you should be able to resume.
Great. Okay, had to unmute myself. Yeah, so we've been working very closely with the governor's staff in the governor's effort to increase collaboration with agencies, utilize resources effectively, and ensure in the adoption of agency request budgets that there's a shared and realistic understanding of the budgetary environment. So whereas traditionally the HECC's agency request budget has been developed with, let me say, little attention to the revenue, to the resources, the actual state anticipated resources, and the need for the governor and the legislature ultimately to adopt a balanced budget. This year, the governor, in working through her staff and working with the agencies, has asked us to pay very close attention to the fact that this is, of course, a constrained fiscal environment where the governor and the legislature will not be able to sort of solve every problem with lots and lots of new state resources. And that's reflected in the instructions that we received and are contained in, described again in docket item 3.1 of your materials. We limit within the agency request budget our requests for new state spending over and above CSL. So this takes the form of policy option packages, that we limit that request for new state general fund spending to 1% of our 2023-25 current biennial budget. That amounts to a cap on the agency's ability to request new general fund that is equal to about $31 million across the entire agency. And that's the 1% that should, that from which or within which our policy option package requests for increased institutional funding or student grant aid fund or state general fund for workforce development should be captured within. Additionally, the governor, through her staff, has indicated support for some of the, a very small number of that long list of policy option packages that we've been reviewing with you and since May and working on internally for longer than that. So let me turn to the couple of documents that should help sort of orient you to that and the overall budget picture before we take any questions and then move on with the more specific program by program approach. Item 3.1A in your packet is a spreadsheet, and it's a simplified version of our budget by category, with the first column being the 2023-25 legislatively approved budget, so our current biennial budget. The second column reflecting the current service level budget, so the state's estimate of the costs of continuing to do in the next biennium what we're doing today. The third column reflecting the general fund policy option packages that the governor's staff has indicated her support for within the $31 million cap. The fourth column reflecting policy option packages that are other funded, so they don't require general funds. They may be the result of, they may be taking advantage of bond proceeds, as in the case of our modernization project, or other support that comes to the agency, the direct support that comes to the agency, and that the governor's staff, have indicated their support for. And then the last column totaling those current service level plus those POPs for those line items. It'll be helpful to see this document in combination with 3.1B, which is a list of all of the policy option packages that have been under consideration by the commission and by staff, color-coded to reflect whether or not the governor has indicated her support for those and whether they fit within that $31 million cap. So the first three items on that list describe the three that have been, in effect, provisionally approved by the governor for inclusion within the ARB. Then you see a couple of yellow funded items where a portion of the Oregon Opportunity Grant request fits within that $31 million cap and is supported by the governor. Decisions still to be made around the Future Ready Oregon reauthorization, the general fund portion of the Future Ready Oregon reauthorization, and then a number of these that are color-coded in red. Now, let me just sort of speak to the sort of one of the tension points or challenges in this process. The fact that we're working much more closely with the governor and within a realistic understanding of the budgetary environment, I think really gives the commission and gives the agency a greater opportunity in some respects to influence the overall development of the governor's recommended budget for the HECC. However, the cap and the constraints that we're working within also create some tension with the HECC's statutory responsibility to recommend to the governor a budget for post-secondary education and training that's aligned with the commission's strategic plan and state goals, right? So when you read ORS 350.075 section E and see this statutory responsibility, it implies that the commission should have an aspirational view of the and recommendation for the investments that are necessary in post-secondary education in order to reach our goals. And there's clearly sort of it's challenging to do both, work within the governor's framework, which requires taking into account available resources and the governor's priorities, and present this meet this statutory requirement for an ambitious request aligned with state goals for post-secondary education and training. We've talked in the past, I've alluded to the likelihood that in adopting a constrained agency request budget aligned with reality and the governor's priorities, the commission may also choose to communicate through some other vehicle its view of the fuller needs of our post-secondary education and training system, at least in connection with your strategic plan and state goals. So that's a conversation that we'll continue to have, I think, today and perhaps conclude in August with some sort of communication to the governor and the governor's team about those needs. And partly as a result of that responsibility, what you'll hear today, what's included in 3.1B, that the fact we're including this long list of policy option packages, including ones that are color-coded red, they haven't been sort of designated by the governor as approved for that $31 million cap. We certainly want the commission to have an understanding of the larger range of options that are available to the state of Oregon as it considers, for example, the kinds of recommendations that it may want to make alongside the formal ARB adoption. Likewise, this will be the final kind of thing I'll say about this before stopping for questions or comments. Likewise, the governor's staff have expressed their interest in and openness in hearing from the commission, not only about that larger set of needs that we may not be able to accommodate within 1%, but also potentially the prioritization of items within the 1%. And I've indicated in the document, those green items have received initial approval or provisional approval from the governor. But I think if the commission felt strongly that she should look at that 1% differently, I think there'd be openness at least to hearing the commission's arguments about what should be prioritized. With that, Mr. Chair, commissioners, I'll pause, stop, and see if there are questions, comments, and then we're prepared to move more into the details.
Great. Any questions or comments for Executive Director Cannon? Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cannon, you mentioned, and it's mentioned in the memo here, that the agency request budget be aligned with the strategic plan described in paragraph D, which obviously would be now our existing strategic plan since we actually don't have the new one yet. But along with that section D, it includes a sentence that determine the costs necessary to provide a quality post-secondary education. Now, I think if you were to put forward an ARB that exactly reflected what DAS and BAM have determined to be the CSL, and it would be very hard for the commission to come forward and say that would meet that combined standard. So it appears to me if you went that route, which maybe the commission decides to go that route, you would also almost have to describe the impacts of going that route, which would have fairly significant negative impacts. Also in your document, you indicated, at least to some degree, that obviously the CSL is always in discussion. So I think the F&A committee particularly, and then the commission as a whole, should have some discussion of what actually is CSL and how it's put together. Particularly some of the assumptions around compensation and some of the differences between the treatment of university employees versus state employees and assumptions around compensation. But do you think it's possible, depending upon obviously whatever budget the agency puts forward, and obviously it's a decision, there'll be a staff recommendation and a commission decision, that the commission has clearly the authority to put something different than what is being proposed. And even if it put forwards what is being proposed here, it could point out very clearly in that recommendation for the record what the negative impacts might be of that budget level.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Devlin. Let me respond to, I think, three things that were incorporated in your question and comments. First, in terms of the commission's authority, right? You are a governor-appointed, Senate-approved commission. As far as I'm concerned, and as I read the law, you can do essentially in this context, whatever you decide to do, right? I am not going to impose, I as your executive director working for you, am not going to impose limits on what this commission has the authority to recommend within its agency request budget. I will today and consistently convey the governor's expectations for this commission in the development of its agency request budget. And that's what I've attempted to do in the docket item and in my comments. In terms, the other thing I wanted to touch on was your comment about the current service level budget. I think particularly within an environment where the request or the direction is that we limit our policy option packages requests to 1%, it places a lot of, that CSL determination matters enormously, right? And as you know, Commissioner Devlin, from your experience, CSL is that the process of determining CSL is at times itself, I don't know about controversial, but there are different perspectives, right, on how to develop CSL or what the correct or accurate CSL is. I would say in my experience, that determination, which is made by the Chief Financial Office at DAS, is not one that the HECC agency staff or commission have had influence over. We have provided information, we've asked questions, but we have typically been a recipient of the DAS CFO determinations of CSL.
But within our recommendation, we could clearly represent the inadequacy of CSL and what some of the issues are.
And thank you. That was my third point, which was that, in response to your question, which is that, yes, it is my expectation, I guess, that that the commission, in submitting its agency request budget, may also highlight to the governor and other parties what the impacts of that agency request budget would be. And that, I think, is appropriate for this commission in its role as helping sort of define and describe the funding landscape for post-secondary education and training, and especially given the statutory mandate that we've discussed today. I think that's a reasonable approach for the commission to take.
And one thing for the record I would like to point out is obviously the commission is responsible to the governor, and they're responsible to the legislature, and they're responsible to the people of Oregon. The governor has a lot of authority in terms of proposing a budget, but she has more authority than most people realize in terms of her veto authority, because most governors exercise this, and I expect this governor will also very judiciously, but they can actually do a line item veto. Whereas with a policy bill coming forward, they either have to approve it, disapprove it, or let it become law. Here, they can simply take a budget appropriation out. It's rarely done, but it has been done, so.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this point for Executive Director Cannon? If not, we'll move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think I'm, like you, probably attempting to refer back to my agenda. I think we were going to turn to student aid and access programs first and hear from Juan Baez-Arevalo and staff at the Office of Student Access and Completion. And again, the goal of these presentations is to remind you of some of what we have been talking about in terms of options for investment in various categories of the HECC budget, answer your questions. So these will be quick overviews of some of the options that have been presented to you over the last couple of months.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I see them on the screen. Are you ready to go?
I do.
It looks like they're.
I did see them on the screen.
Juan, are you guys ready? You're up.
Hear us?
Yes, now we can.
Perfect. And we have a couple of slides for you. So we'll begin. Chair Heyman, distinguished members of the Commission, Executive Director Cannon. For the record, my name is Juan Baez-Arevalo, Director of the Office of Student Access and Completion. And joining me today is Kyra King, OSAC's Financial Aid Policy Analyst, responsible for the Keystone Program known as the Oregon Opportunity Grant. And Aaron Rao, OSAC's Deputy Director, who oversees the essential elements of our programs and operations at OSAC. And the policy option packages that we have related to financial aid to share with you include a package for the Oregon Opportunity Grant. It seeks an investment of $150 million above CSL. $148 million of that would go towards OOG grants that would restore the purchasing power of recipients, which are the highest need, lowest income, most diverse students in Oregon. And $2 million would be dedicated to award persistence and completion grants, which we have existing statutory authority to issue such grants. And I hope that later this year, we will be presenting to you a related administrative rules that would guide those specific grants and how they would assist students who may have exhausted Pell or even OOG eligibility, but are a few courses away from completion or at risk of dropping out and not completing at all. The investment increase would allow us to expand the awarding tiers that we currently have of student aid index up to 10,000, reaching more middle income students throughout Oregon. There is a related legislative concept that would allow us to decouple the Oregon Opportunity Grant from the tuition equity law, which currently prevents some undocumented learners from receiving the Oregon Opportunity Grant. But the coupling of the laws would ensure that all Oregon residents could access the OOG. Another key law change that we have been seeking is to remove the SRM language, the shared responsibility model language that restricts the Oregon Opportunity Grant award amounts to half-time and full-time students only. This is important because by allowing OOG awards to students who are attending less than half-time and right-sizing awards to students who are enrolled less than full-time, but more than half-time, would help those students have better access to education. In addition, expanding the Oregon Opportunity Grant to reach those who are enrolled in short-term career technical education programs, particularly our community colleges, and aligning the OOG with the Oregon Promise expands the types of programs that students can enroll at, particularly those training programs in high demand in the labor market. At $148 million, the OOG award model we are using in the forecast is a new one. And in time, a different session, perhaps we can go into the details of how that it would work. But this concept was jointly developed by two members from our advisory who represent different sectors. And it involves having a base common award amount across all levels. And on top of that, a differentiated percentage of tuition that is covered that is also equal across all levels in terms of the percentage rate. So you have an access base of investment for student aid and an affordability component representing the tuition expense. This investment level that you see outlined allows the award amounts for the Oregon Opportunity Grant to grow annually and to keep up with the rising cost of attendance, specifically tuition differential as well. Now, moving on to other concepts that you see in the PowerPoint presentation, I want to emphasize that one of them is a brand new grant for Oregon future educators. And you all know how difficult it is to have people commit to teaching and such a honorable profession. This particular grant would allow future educators enrolled in 2-year programs at community colleges and 4-year programs as well at the bachelor level and those at a graduate level with differentiated award amounts per sector, and to help those students address the remaining need they have in their financial aid packages so that it would assist Oregon future educators have less amounts of money that they would have to borrow, so they would have less loans to pay back upon completion of their career and dedicated service to education and growth of the development of Oregon's youth. The likely award amounts will be tiered, priced differently at the associate's level, a bit higher at the undergraduate license programs level, and a bit higher at the graduate level. Because as you know, at graduate school, many of the state and federal grants don't apply to graduate school programs. There is a legislative concept associated with this policy option package. Another key investment is the Early Learning Professionals Grant, and that is one that you have heard about in the past. In fact, it was passed into law. And as part of our statutory authority, we have administrative rules in place. We've worked on getting all the application tools ready for it. All that is missing is commitment from the Oregon legislature to start and to staff this program that would help the development of early learning professionals as soon as possible. Another program, it's a critical program that we have been administering, is called the Oregon Teacher Scholars. This is a very successful program that we have been implementing in coordination with the Educator Advancement Council. It targets diverse teacher candidates. It is funded through other funds passed through to us from ODE and the EAC. What you see here is an investment growth of other funds that would allow the program to continue to grow, as it was recently expanded by the Oregon legislature to include other professions such as school psychologists, counselors, and speech pathologists. So we've seen growth in the regular application of teacher licensed teachers, would-be licensed teachers, and now new inclusion of other categories. So an expenditure limitation increase of $3 million will help grow this program and keep it successful and sustainable into the next biennium. Other key OSAC concepts that you see, and moving on to the very last slide, and you certainly are aware of the troubles and the multiple ongoing shortfalls of the federal government's rollout of the new Better FAFSA. The challenge that it created for students, families, institutions, state agencies, and the impact on college going rates. At OSAC, we are very pleased to inform you that we are having the best application year for multiple aid programs, starting with our private scholarships, which are up 26% in the number of submitted applications and 28% increase in valid applications. Overall, the highest numbers of started and submitted applications that we've seen since the fall of 2020. Also, for the Oregon Promise, the class of 2024 has produced the best and most comprehensive application year in history of the program. This is very significant, particularly in the year where we've had such setbacks by the federal FAFSA rollout. Despite those trip hazards from the federal government, if you will, this historic levels of applications for OSAC and for Oregonians throughout the state for various private scholarships, public grants. We owe this success to the work coordination of our Aspire team, which coordinates also our outreach throughout the state. They work with over 180 sites across the state. They broker and coordinate multiple partnerships, communications, social media, trainings, publications. They train our partners who do college access. So the relatively small amount that you see there, about $1.2 million, would allow us to staff up the Aspire program to respond to the increased demand for its services and to continue the successful expansion of this program, which is our core career and college readiness initiative. That success that we've seen with applications this year, and no doubt is associated by the coordination, through the coordination of this team. Now, other college access programs that you see, the very last investment proposal would allow us to expand capacity throughout the state in existing college access programs, many of them that we partner by sharing information today, and to build and empower new programs of organizations that are particularly dedicated to serving underrepresented populations and groups that new groups dedicated to college access who may be originating from within those underserved communities. That's what that proposal is all about. We also have had ideas for a legislative concept, and we've seen in the past some legislative initiatives from legislative committees seeking to have this kind of investment in college access programs. Thank you. We'll be glad to address any questions you may have.
Any questions for Juan or his team?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
it's just a question on one of the calculations in the budget on the Oregon Opportunity Grant. Obviously, the Opportunity Grant itself, in the calculation of CSL, they'd have to use some factor. So it's shown in the spreadsheet as going from 308 approximately to 329. And then with the policy option package, it would be 354. Is that correct? And what sort of inflationary factor was applied? Looks like about 6% plus to the CSL.
On the,
It looks like it's cumulative here. It goes 308,
yes,
29, 24, then 354.
Chair Heyman, Commissioner Devlin, I believe the multiplier there for CSL is 6.8, if I'm correct. Tom Reel, can you verify that?
Chairman Heyman, it's Commissioner Devlin. Yeah, that it does get the extra bit of inflation because it's considered a special pay. So it was around a 6% inflation rate applied to the OOG.
Okay, thank you. I just needed that.
Right. I had one, mostly a comment question with regards to three different kind of education grants trying to address specific grant needs. Do those in your concept areas? And I was just wondering, do those all involve some sort of required service subsequent to receiving that grant?
Specifically, and I'm going to point to the Oregon Teacher Scholars, which is a program that we had in Oregon for years now, and it's very successful. And the recipients of one of the records that we've seen is that the recipients of that particular grant have been able to successfully receive their teacher license and go on to work as educators in our state. And many of them are now starting to matriculate up and become administrators, which is great. They're helping diversify the administrative workforce as well. So there isn't a specific requirement that they have to teach in Oregon or at a public school or anything like that. It's just that the requirement is that they have to be enrolled in an approved teacher education program. So one of the things that our team does is verify with the departments of education at the colleges and universities that indeed those individuals that have applied are enrolled and admitted into the programs. And that's very key, as you know, because someone may be taking an interest in education, but not necessarily be in that track. And so that verification that they are in the track is essential. And for the Oregon Teacher Scholars, since the start, it has only applied to the last 2 years of the program of study. So if someone's in a bachelor's degree, it's truly the last 2 years. The very last one usually is, student teaching at a school and practicum and all of that. And then for those at a master's levels, of course, a very different, generally 18-month to 24-month window of time. The very new program, the Future Educators that you see there, is an initiative that could be combined with many other financial aid. As you know, there's a stackability of aid. And we've seen this with the Oregon Teacher Scholars, because if they're in an undergraduate program and they're receiving the Oregon Opportunity Grant and they're receiving the Pell and they receive the Oregon Teacher Scholars as an undergraduate in the last 2 years, there's going to be very little remaining need that they will have to borrow for, which is great. The Oregon Future Educators would take that same idea and look at what the remaining need is. So for example, if somebody's trying to get an associate's degree to become a paraeducator and they're on that track and they get an additional award on top of any other aid, that individual will then complete and graduate and go on to work at a local school district from their community college, moving on to a local school district with little to no debt. If they move on to a bachelor's degree program, the same thing would apply. And that is the logic, that we're building a foundation of stackable aid that takes care of remaining need, that supports a critical workforce need that we have in our state of educators, of future educators. And that incentive and the fact that they are Oregonians, number one. Two, enrolled in an approved program in our state at one of our public and private nonprofit institutions, has a very high probability that they would be teaching a state in our state.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you. I also want to just appreciative of your proposed changes in the administration of the Oregon Opportunity Grant to include students who are less than part-time. I think that would be a positive move for you, so I appreciate that. Any other questions for Juan? I think we'll move on to the presentation on workforce development then. Hi.
Hi, Chair Heyman. Jennifer Purcell, Director for Future Ready Oregon at the HECC. And I'm joined by my colleague, Julia. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Julia Steinberger. I'm the Director of the Office of Workforce Investments here at the HECC.
And we're going to present today on the proposed reauthorization for Future Ready Oregon and continuing workforce investments, as well as a number of other items in the workforce development category. And I think I'm going to go ahead and start us off. We are continuing to examine what we would do with an additional investment in Future Ready Oregon. You will see in your packet, and as Director Cannon mentioned in his summary remarks, that this would include the reauthorization of approximately $62.5 million in ARPA funding, which is the balance of the federal funding that was authorized for Future Ready Oregon in 2022. These funds will be fully obligated by the end of this year, but don't need to be spent by grantee organizations until the end of 2026. So they need to be reauthorized in our 25-27 biennial budget. In addition, we're proposing an investment of $75 million in state general fund, and as was indicated, we're working closely with the governor's office to determine whether continuing workforce investments will be included as an exception to the CSL plus 1% cap. Notably, Oregon continues to experience significant workforce shortages and struggles to take advantage of workforce opportunities in industries and occupations that are critical to equitable prosperity for all Oregonians. Workforce-related priorities, programs, and other initiatives across the state are not always well aligned, resulting in a workforce system that is often fragmented, inequitable, and difficult to navigate. As we have indicated, Future Ready Oregon has federal ARPA funds that are included in your other fund category that have been obligated but need to be reauthorized through 2026. and state dollars are necessary to continue this investment into the new biennium and into the future. Additionally, state dollars are necessary to continue the Oregon Conservation Corps, which Julia will speak to, and ongoing investments ensure equitable workforce and talent development strategies continue to address Oregon's most critical workforce shortages and strategic opportunities. So the proposed solution is a continued investment in Future Ready Oregon and other workforce development programs that have demonstrated success in responding to critical workforce shortages and opportunities. And this solution will integrate both proven best practices from Future Ready Oregon programs, as well as align Future Ready Oregon statutes with other HECC workforce development statutes to contribute to ongoing efforts for a more unified, equitable, and accessible workforce system. All right, so building on the lessons learned from Future Ready Oregon, this proposal continues funding for programs that have demonstrated success, specifically in engaging diverse learners and students, and proposes statutory amendments that continue to advance systems alignment. What we've learned through the implementation of Future Ready Oregon is that investments and strategies are more effective in advancing a diverse workforce when they center the needs of historically underserved and underrepresented students and learners, when they advance a shared leadership model that engages employers, education and training providers, and community partners in both policy development and program implementation. They're more effective when they focus on a cohesive and comprehensive strategy that prioritizes key sectors of Oregon's economy, and when funding allows for education and training to be coupled with wraparound supports and services. And in particular, the flexibility of state funds and partnerships have been critical to the development of new programs and the expansion of existing programs, complementing and leveraging the more restrictive federal funding by allowing for capacity building, wraparound supports, as I mentioned, and providing for low barrier opportunities for career exploration and credential attainment. Additionally, the flexible funding has allowed for innovative approaches to education delivery that are responsive to the needs of learners, like offering mobile training and incumbent worker training and culturally relevant curriculum and earn and learn models. Again, coupled with wraparound supports, these have been critical to participant success. In the first 2 years of programming, Future Ready Oregon investments have served over 11,600 participants. 92% of participants identify with one or more of the priority populations included in the statute, and 2/3 of participants identify with at least 2 priority populations. Participants have indicated a 97% completion rate for the services provided, which include intentional support services, career coaching, and workforce development training. And additionally, the Future Ready Oregon participants are more diverse than the labor force overall. So as we look ahead and we look at integrating best practices from Future Ready Oregon and aligning statutes to contribute to a more unified, equitable, and accessible workforce system, we are proposing, again, the reauthorization of $62.5 million in other fund expenditure limitation authority in 25-27 for those ARPA funds that have been obligated but not yet spent. And then proposing a $75 million general fund investment for continuing equitable workforce education and training strategies that address critical workforce shortages and strategic workforce opportunities in Oregon. These continued investments include proposed, so this is the $75 million, include 20 million for continued investment in the prosperity programs, which are the investments that went through the 9 local workforce boards. That proposal is to continue the flexible funding for a holistic approach that includes participant supports, capacity for partnerships, and systems navigation. Additionally, a $15 million investment in youth programs, which includes 10 million for the ongoing administration of the Oregon Conservation Corps, and funding for youth programs that align with and are responsive to key industries, critical workforce shortages, and strategic workforce opportunities. An additional $35 million investment in workforce ready grants. These are the competitive funding opportunities that focus on key sectors of our economy, which include healthcare, manufacturing, and technology, center the needs of priority populations, couple education and training with wraparound supports, and engage partnerships that include employers, educators, and community partners. We're proposing $3 million for regional and statewide systems alignment that would provide funding for local industry sector strategies that are responsive to and aligned with statewide priorities. And then an additional $2 million for ongoing assessment and administration, including the ongoing assessment of participant outcomes for the initial Future Ready Oregon investment, and funds for the integration of supply and demand data to better inform data-driven decision-making and strategies. So we're proposing to continue the investments to advance a diverse workforce that focus on centering priority populations, include flexible funding that encourages innovation and culturally responsive supports, and advances a shared leadership model through partnerships. And then there's a companion legislative concept that focuses on improving systems alignment. It continues to integrate best practices by prioritizing key sectors of our economy, as well as defining critical workforce shortages and strategic workforce opportunities, expanding the duties of the Workforce and Talent Development Board, ensuring that the local workforce board's local plans are including responses to statewide priorities, and again, continuing the investments in strategic grant making. Additionally, the companion LC includes consistency in program requirements and goals through the alignment and consolidation of youth workforce development statutes, and it strengthens regional and statewide alignment by clarifying the connections between local sector partnerships and statewide industry consortia. And with that, I will turn it over to Julia to speak about some additional workforce strategies and proposals.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm just going to speak first for a little bit about the youth piece that Jennifer just described. I just want to make super clear what is in here, what is in this policy option package. So over the past several biennia, the Office of Workforce Investments Youth Workforce Development portfolio has grown. In 2021, the legislature established 2 new programs, the Oregon Youth Employment Program and the Oregon Conservation Corps. And both of those programs have been very successful. However, the Oregon Conservation Corps was appropriated as one-time funding in this biennium and is not included in HECC CSL. So without approved continued funding, the program will go away. And just a refresher, that program provides paid core-based work experiences to young Oregonians in wildfire prevention. So the program really has 2 benefits, one for youth participants who gain career exposure and workforce training, and also it benefits Oregon communities because these crews are performing real wildfire mitigation work. As Jennifer mentioned, this also includes an additional investment in the Oregon Youth Employment Program. So the base investment is part of CSL, but because of the success and the need of that program, we included an additional investment as well. And now I'll speak to 2 additional workforce policy option packages that were not approved by the governor's office under the 1% cap. First, I'll talk about the Workforce and Education Pathways for Justice Involved Youth POP, or adults, sorry, not youth. This is a joint proposal from the Office of Workforce Investments and the Office of Community Colleges and Workforce Development, and it provides about $1.8 million to sustain and expand post-secondary education and training opportunities for adults in custody. It would establish in statute PSU's higher education and prison program and allow for expansion of that program. And this program provides incarcerated individuals from the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility they're co-enrolled as AmeriCorps members to act as peer support to their fellow students at Coffee Creek. And in addition to receiving services to ensure their success at PSU, they also earn an AmeriCorps stipend and an AmeriCorps Education Award to pay for college and receive job training. This proposal would also establish in statute and provide funding for the WorkSource Oregon Reentry Program, which provides WorkSource Oregon services to adults in custodies and correctional facilities. These services include things like mock interviews, building employability skills, developing a resume, vocational training, etc. And the Oregon Workforce Partnership, which is the Association of Local Workforce Development Boards, piloted this program and then received a grant from the Federal Department of Labor to expand that. And that's up and running. And so this additional state funding would ensure sustainability of that program. And then the final piece of this is in the last legislative session, Senate Bill 269 passed and required the HECC and the Department of Education or the Department of Corrections to enter into a memorandum of understanding regarding correctional education and to convene and staff an advisory committee, but did not provide any funding or positions for that work. So this would provide one position at the HECC for that work and for the work that I mentioned before. And then the second policy option package that I'll speak about is around tribal workforce development. And I want to make clear that we would really need to and want to have significant engagement with our tribal partners about this POP. So this is a very draft idea at the moment. Right now, as written, the POP would establish and appropriate funding for the Tribal Workforce Access Fund, which the Office of Workforce Investments would administer, and it would create tribe-specific funding agreements under our office's existing workforce development programs, or it would create new tribal-specific workforce development opportunities. OE would work with HECC's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access team and our tribal partners to co-create funding opportunities and programs that are responsive to tribal needs. And the POP would also fund one position in the Office of Workforce Investments to do this. Thank you.
Other questions for Jennifer or Julia? I'll just add a comment. I'm appreciative of your continued work with adults in custody. As you know, an area which I'd love to see some broad, educational opportunity within all of our correctional institutes in a coordinated way. And so I'm appreciative that that's still on your screen. So thank you for that. Any other comments or questions for this group? So both of you, Julia, Jennifer, thank you so much. I think we'll move on to agency tools and infrastructure. I believe that Ramona Rademacher will be making that presentation. Hi, Ramona.
Hi, and I'll be joined by Amy Cox, the director of our research and data office as well. My name is Ramona Rademacher. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of HECC. We're going to talk about the agency tools and infrastructure POPs. It should be a fairly brief overview. The first policy option package that I want to direct your attention to is actually the first one on the list of policy option packages, the modernization project, or the LEARN system, which stands for Lifelong Educational Advancement Resource Network. It's really our continuing project for the third biennium now to get a single IT system for the HECC that combines the functionality across offices and gives our staff and students a modern tool so that they can get what they need. It is number one on this list because it is a very high priority for us, and you can see it's marked in green, and it is supported by the governor at this point for inclusion in the governor's recommended budget. This really represents the final installment or final replacement of 3 different systems. The first one being our financial aid management information system, which is the primary system that students use to apply for Oregon Opportunity Grant, Oregon Promise, scholarships, and other financial resources so that they can attend post-secondary education. The second component of this is the eligible trainer provider list, which is a federally required element that that OE oversees. To date, we have not had this available other than in a very kind of rudimentary PDF version, and we have an audit requirement that says that we will get this done and get it done quickly. And last but not least is the third system is the Office for our private career school systems, Oregon degree authorization, and academic program approvals. We've had a catastrophic failure for the system that they've been using, and they are really not able to access a lot of their own data at this point, and they're using a lot of paper processes to move on. The benefits of replacing these systems is FAMUS particularly is a 40-year-old system, and it tends to be rather unreliable. It kicks students out, and we don't in any way want to dissuade them from applying for financial aid. It disproportionately impacts low-income and underrepresented students. So, and ETPL, like I said, is not only a requirement by the federal government, but if we are not able to get this up and running, it puts about $32 million annually in danger of we would not receive that if we're unable to get a system up that allows job seekers and employers to know where WIOA approved training options exist. So these are very critical parts of an IT system. We started out, it was just FAMUS, then we added the other 2 components. Our plan for this next phase is to finish the 3 components that I just talked about, and also begin planning for an agency-wide grant management system. Billions of dollars flow through the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and at this point, we don't have a single system that allows us to track that money and whether or not it's having the effect that is intended. We use a lot of disparate systems in order to do that, and it's not effective or efficient. So what this next phase is, the third and hopefully final phase to complete that we have, the reason that it's not completed last biennium is we ended up being placed on hold for 8 months by the Enterprise Information System group at DAS so that we could bolster some of our systems and our documentation. And so we lost some time there. We also had contracts come in above what we predicted they were going to be. And so we are going to, by the end of this biennium, we're going to complete the core functionality of the system. So each of those three pieces I talked about will have the main things completed and operational, but each one will still need some added functionality that's been placed in a deferred scope kind of place. The for FAMIS, if we don't get these resources, it'll be the college access and outreach that will not be built into it, as well as FAFSA Plus, which allows high schools and nonprofits and community-based organizations to track where students are in the FAFSA application process and work with them to kind of get them over the finish line. For private career schools, ODA and APA, they're not going to have access to online transcripts, an electronic invoicing process or a complaint system, and they won't be able to manage their tuition protection fund electronically. They'd still have to use the new system, but also do a lot of manual processes. And for employer training provider list, it's the federal reporting that's at risk of not being completed. There's 3 positions in this, chief data officer, project manager, and a business analyst. And in total, it totals $1.1 million in general fund and $5.8 million in other funds or Q bonds that we would be going out for. And so that's really a recap of our modernization project and where we are, and also the intent for the next phase of it. The next item I want to talk about is in the middle of the second page of the policy list, and it is not recommended for inclusion. It is the enhanced customer service package, and it is really a catch-all staffing package. So there's 8 positions in this particular policy option package that will not be in the governor's recommended budget at this point. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but these particular positions do have some pretty strong impact on programs and services that will either stall or stop, or in some places not be able to begin. For example, we currently have 1 LD position for the direct admissions work, and this requests 2 positions to continue that work. It will not be funded, so that will stop or stall, and we'll have to figure out how to maintain the support of that program. The program repository we talked to you about, of all of the resources available in post-secondary education and training, to tell people what's available to them and where they can go, not only to get training, but also to get workers who are skilled in that, will not be built or begun. One of the positions will result in continued kind of slow internal auditing work. We have 1 internal auditor. The state's assessment is that we need about 6. We had asked for an additional 1, and with that not being funded, it will mean that we need to continue to work with other partners to get them to review our work before those audits can become final. There was a position to focus on rural students and services. We've asked for that a couple of years in a row now, and it is in this package. And also there was a request for a position who could perform financial analysis in the private career schools. Instead, we'll likely have to contract out for those services. And last but not least, it'll put us out of compliance with the AmeriCorps program. We are required to, there's a mandated service about disaster relief that we're not going to be able to provide. And again, this is something that we've asked for several years. This package is $2.2 million in general fund. And the reason we only have 3 things to talk to you about is it looks like we jammed about 9 ideas into this one particular policy option package. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk about the expansion of the OLGC program.
Thank you, Ramona. Good afternoon, Chair Heyman, Chair Rowe, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Amy Cox. I'm the Office Director for the Office of Research and Data, and I am here because of to speak to you about the Oregon Longitudinal Data Collaborative POP. The Oregon Longitudinal Data Collaborative, or OLDC, is an interagency program shared between the HECC, the Department of Education, the Employment Department, and others. It is housed in my office, so I am pleased to be here and share with you what this is about. The program is a small, but I would say mighty, interagency program with a handful of staff that combines data from those different agencies and creates data reports and research out of them, really that span the K-12 through college, university, post-secondary education and training, and then into employment in Oregon, and looks at those pathways and really starts to examine some of the things that any individual agency cannot examine on its own. The requests for those data reports and that research have begun to far outstrip the program's capacity. They have only 2 research staff. So really, it's quite a small program. And the POP is really designed to expand that staffing to be able to essentially double their output so that they could produce more than one individual research study and a handful of data reports every year, but could produce more than that. The program began really just with this output in the last few years. The number of requests for the data and research have grown dramatically since then. And so this is a POP to fill out that staffing a little more closely with what the demand is. I will note that even though this POP is not part of the 1% cap of the ARB, its funding is actually still under discussion. And that is because it is actually funded through the Student Success Act that flows into the Department of Education. It's an interagency program. And we are in continued conversation with the Department of Education to see if expansion can happen through there. So that is the sort of status update, the explanation, and also the status update of the OLDC POP.
Any questions for Amy and or Ramona? I have one real quick, Ramona, with assuming the continued funding of the HECC modernization, when would you anticipate that work to be completed? Would it be in the next biennium or further on?
The core functionality should be completed in this particular biennium. We're trying right now to get the contract signed and to begin implementation at the beginning of July. In fact, our executive steering committee met this afternoon and voted to move forward with the components that had been negotiated with our vendor. And so at this point, we're submitting, and we do believe that all of the main things for all 3 will be developed. But as I said, we had to push off certain functions that we would begin in the next biennium. I talked about it in a 3-phase kind of way. The reality is it should be pretty seamless in terms of building these systems if this package is funded. We will build the functions that have been identified for this biennium, and we'll just keep working if this ends up getting funded.
Thank you. A quick question for Amy. You indicated that there are an increasing number of requests for information and data. Could you tell me who are the primary or predominant requesters?
That is a great question, Chair Heyman. Thank you. The primary requesters are the agency partners themselves, the legislature, which has been particularly interested in some of the work underway for some parallel work that they're tasked with doing, especially around the K-12 workforce. Right now, the program has the OLDC has a study and dashboard underway looking at the K-12 workforce, and that is also something the legislature is looking at closely. So agency partners in the legislature. We also do get requests from institutions and external researchers. The program is a ways from really having capacity to being able to address those kinds of more external requests, but primarily the agencies and the legislature.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Well, again, thanks. I think we'll move on to the College and University Support Fund, and I think Jim Pinkard is going to be handling that. Hello, Jim.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Good afternoon. For the record, Jim Pinkard with Post-Secondary Finance and Capital. I do have a couple of slides for you in the short time that we do have together, and want to offer some information, excuse me, and additional context around the institution support funding, focusing on the Community College Support Fund and the Public University Support Fund. So we do in this information focus on the education and general related activities of the institution, so no auxiliary or other activities. I will use the expression base funding to note the amount needed to offer existing programming at the institutions, which assumes no programs, state or enrollment change, or staffing or enrollment changes, and does not include transformative or structural changes. And this is compared to CSL, which I'll speak to in just a brief minute. The timeline that we used to do this work and the guidance we offered to the institutions, we talked about that, if you recall, at the April F&A, so I won't dwell on that. When we talk CSL, or current service level, being an estimate of the cost to continue legislatively approved programs, as Ben noted earlier, these calculations are made by DAS CFO staff using a blended rate approach, which has been developed over the years. And I compare it on this chart on the right-hand side to that, again, base funding amount, which is calculated by the institutions themselves with a bit of a different approach. And you can see that by sector, there's about a 2.5% to 3% difference between the two, largely due to salaries and wages, because DAS CFO staff uses a standard inflation rate for non-state employee personnel, whereas the base funding calculations the institutions provide include an estimate for, wages and salary growth increases into the next biennium, in some cases for negotiation processes that haven't yet concluded. So it's routine to see about a 2.5% to 3% gap between the two. So for the colleges, 10.5% cost growth compared to CSL 7.4%, and you can see the similar number for the universities. When we do talk about the Community College Support Fund, which is the main institution support funding vehicle for the colleges, we see a 10.5% or roughly $202 million cost increase from this biennium to the next biennium. It's important to note 88% of that increase, or $178 million, is related to personnel costs. New unfunded requirements are going to add a couple million worth of cost as well. The colleges themselves, they did request a 23% increase in state funding. which is largely based on the components you see on this chart. A level of state funding needed to cover the growth in spending, and then some revenue shifting and some other components. I do feel it important to note, in full disclosure, that early last week, the colleges did submit supplementary information where their request was revised to exclude a fund balance component. And that revision led to a 15.7% increase in state funding, which is roughly $125 million. They also are projecting enrollment growth annually of 3.7% per year and tuition cost growth of 4.2% per year under their revised funding scenario. So you see originally, and this is kind of a set of options for you, a range of choices. We've highlighted the current funding, just under $800 million. We do note to the left of that, as part of the process, we'll have to submit a 10% reduction. But to the right, we offer three stop points on this continuum of choices. CSL would add 7.4%. There's the community college initial request, which was a 23% increase. There's another point between the affordability and original CC request, community college request, which again is around 16%. And then we call it an affordability option, which would add to CSL a little bit to better manage affordability, keep tuition and fee increases as low as possible. Again, originally the colleges themselves had been estimating annual enrollment growth of 1%. They're now a little bit higher at 3.5% or so. And so you can see the interaction between the level of state funding, the level of tuition and fee increases, and the use of fund balance. Those are all the moving components. So on this chart, I think this is the takeaway chart for the colleges to express what the option set, what a regional option, a reasonable option set could look like for you. We have a similar chart for universities, but before we talk about that, for the record, I wanted to note the 5 POPs that were submitted by the colleges. I won't spend much time on that, but just note them for your information. As we turn our attention to the Public University Support Fund, which is the main support funding vehicle for the universities, we note that their costs are growing about 9.5% from this biennium to the next, just under $400 million. 82% of that increase is again related to personnel costs. And there's information on the left-hand side of this chart that we're required to provide to the legislature during Ways and Means, but just recaps the identified unfunded mandates and other reporting requirements that they have to abide by. The public universities, when we're going to take a bit of a different approach, when we look at their base funding, right? So if we take the cost growth from this biennium to the next of 9.5%, and if we apply that same growth rate to state appropriations, what then does that do to the other sources of revenue? For net tuition and fees, it grows for each year of the next biennium, tuition and fees on a gross basis by about 5%, not considering any remissions growth. And you can see the other fund balance. They do have a $37 million projected use of fund balance for the next biennium under that scenario. We did, as HECC staff, run through a number of funding scenarios that we ran through to come up with this chart, which just shows you, again, what I would think would be a set of reasonable funding levels. The current funding level, of course, highlighted. The 10% reduction is noted. CSL would add 7% for the public universities. There's the university request of 26.7% increase, which would increase student affordability, enhance student support and equity-based investments, and promote additional progress toward our statewide goals. And then we tried to offer an affordability pathway, kind of a middle point between those two, that we think would allow the institutions to keep their tuition and fee increases below that 5% point. The state's share increases slightly. We think that would likely improve student affordability slightly, and we would maintain progress towards state goals. For the record, the POPs submitted by the universities, the 3 POPs submitted, I won't spend much time, but they're included for your reference. And then I do want to note all the good things that come from an increase in state funding. We talked a little bit about this during the April F&A, but state institution support funding, research shows, does a lot of good things for the universities. It increases a student's odds of earning a bachelor's degree. It increases the likelihood or decreases the likelihood a student will take on debt. And it decreases the total borrowing for students. For the colleges, it increases the likelihood of transfer. It decreases loan defaults of all kinds: house loans, car loans, consumer credit loans. And as a bonus, it increases the credit scores on average within the zip code of where the students live, which is surprising. And it, of course, increases the state. An increase in the state appropriations yields a larger increase in the graduation rates for diverse students. So a lot of good comes out of increased state funding. I will add a bit of additional context. The ARB will include a 10% reduction in current funding. That's a standard component of the process every cycle. And the interaction between institution support funding and the other HECC budget components that you've been hearing about today is really important. How do we improve student affordability? We can do so via a number of means, but the interaction between the different funding levels at our disposal is important. And I think it's important to note that the erosion of student affordability will accelerate if tuition increases continue at similar rates without structural change. And so that's an important point, I think, to end on. With the last comment that I'll make, this is the CSL budget. And so what we have is essentially, although it's not noted on the slide, a 7.2% increase, which translates to a $145.8 million increase in support funding for both the colleges and universities into the next biennium. So I'll pause there for questions, if anybody has any.
Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
Not to belabor this discussion like I would like to do for the next hour, but just ask Mr. Pinkham if he could prepare something for the committee's at least consideration and knowledge, is for his tables that appear, I believe, on page 6 and page 13. Could he prepare a comparison between what the institutions have indicated as base funding versus what the CSL is? I know particularly in the area of compensation, the CSL is at 6.8%, and so that leads to a significant reduction from base funding. Also, probably the other area is in services and supplies, because that's at a significantly lower percentage than what they're requesting. And but I'd like to see those numbers. I've done some, back of the envelope calculations. And one of the things about salaries that are interesting to me is that I looked at the instructions from DAST to agencies in terms of calculating future costs. And on page 58 of those instructions, it indicates that this is not exactly the budget direction, but it's part of the budget direction. But looking at the future, they should calculate compensation costs for state employees at an increase of 14.5% in 25-27, 9% the next year, and 9% the next biennium after that. That's a total of about 32.5%, or about 36% compounded over 6 years. For non-state employees, which obviously are the university and community college employees. They're calculating at 6.8% in the coming biennium, 6.6 the following biennium, and 6.7 the biennium after that, which about 20%, compounded about 21.5. I mean, it's actually a bias in the system built into CSL, because the way the state does this is they set aside money in the emergency board for collective bargaining agreements. The community colleges and the universities don't share in those funds. And to give you an idea, in this current biennium, the legislature had set aside, I believe, 320 or 330 million general funds in one category and 110 in another. And in the short session, they appropriated 465 million in general funds to cover increases in employee compensation. And that only is general funds. Realize that general funds don't pay for increases for the Department of Transportation, and that a lot of the cost in the Department of Human Services is paid for by federal funds. So, I mean, it's an internal bias that's built into the system for calculating CSL. And if anybody has looked at collective bargaining agreements that have been agreed by the state or community colleges or universities, they know that 7% isn't going to do it. I'm not going to comment on the 7% in terms of what is appropriate or what is being actually agreed to now, but it's well above the 7%. Part of that is inflation in recent years. Part of that is probably getting people back to negotiating over increases that are based on current inflation, not the type of increases employees have had due to the sort of very high inflation that we've had in recent years. I just think that the commission and the committee needs to consider this and at least make some type of statement as to the inadequacy of this calculation in terms of employee costs. Services and supplies are harder to deal with because to some people, when you say services and supplies, means pencils and paper clips. But services supplies can be very diverse by agency. I mean, a lot of the agencies contract for services. Those are services and supplies. And sometimes those grow faster than the built-in rate that they have, which is, I think, about 4.2 or 4.4%. But I'd like the committee to see that. The other questions I had for Jim were, the odd thing about this calculation is when they determine CSL is they look historically at how much of these costs the state has paid. So this kind of just actually regenerates every biennium our lack of support for higher ed. So do you know what percentage DAS used in this in terms of, was it like 25 or 24 or 23% of the costs that this would be the state obligation?
So the CSL calculation does only apply to E&G. And when we look at E&G for the universities, it's about 25% of their total spend. And for the colleges, it's about 40%.
Yeah, they're completely different systems.
Yeah.
And the last question I had was, because this is always a debate, and I might be in the middle on this debate. It's outside our venue, but K-12 tends to underestimate property tax receipts, and DAS and LFO tend to overestimate them. So DAS must have used a different figure for property taxes for community colleges. Do you know what it was? Because I think the Department of Revenue has been saying the average is about 4.9% per year. And they seem to be somewhat below that in terms of what the community colleges are saying.
Yeah, let me, I think it's, so I want to say first, I think it's about 3.7% per year, but I can double check that.
Okay.
But I will tell you that the calculation DAS used did come from the Department of Revenue folks. And as HECC staff, we compared that to the estimate that came from the colleges themselves for next biennium as to what their increase would be for property tax, and it was almost spot on. It was almost identical, which was eased my mind because those two estimates were very, very close.
Yeah,
So.
it usually hasn't. Well, it's usually been not as close because obviously the property taxes by Constitution are limited to a 3% increase, but that doesn't include new development, nor does it include things like tax increment districts when they come back on the property tax rolls. So often it's been in about the 4.8, 4.9% range. Okay, those are my questions, Mr. Chairman, but I really do think we need to concentrate on this CSL calculation. I'm not saying what we put in a recommendation. I'm just saying that we clearly have to point out that some of the numbers are arbitrary and not based on actual data.
Mr. Devlin, I appreciate that. And, you know, I think there's an opportunity in the future perhaps for us to have a conversation directly with DAS about this, and hope that we'll be able to do that in the not too distant future.
Mr. Chairman, if I might state just one thing in the last, I don't think it's a very positive outcome to have on the university side or the community college side, but on the university side, a $60 million overall increase in state payments for the cost, and a $271 million increase to students and parents.
Well, thank you. Any other questions for Jim? Okay. Thanks. I guess we'll move on to the next topic, which is the higher education capital, which I believe you are presenting as well.
I certainly am. Thank you so much. Did want to talk about capital construction projects for the colleges and universities. These will be POPs within the ARV. We do want to start off by just giving you a quick recap. Over the last 18, 19 years or so, the state has invested a fair chunk of change into capital improvements for the institutions. And so we do want to measure progress. This is really for the public universities. We measure it through something we call the Facility Condition Index, or the FCI, which you note on this chart has been cut in half and should be around the 10% range when you talk to the facilities management experts in the field. And we're right at that point, which we feel pretty good about. Capital principles and the limitations associated with college projects and the university principles. We've gone through that last fall. You may recall at the November F&A, we spent some time talking through some of that. We also did in this past April talk about the timeline that we use for both the colleges and universities. I will note that for the public universities, for the 14 projects that they did submit, we as staff went to every public university campus, including OSU Cascades, and walked through the facilities that they were submitting for renovation and talked to them about any new projects. So I really appreciate the time that we spent on their campuses, and I appreciate the staff time it takes to host us. And so a big heartfelt thank you to all the people we did talk to on campus. The college rubric and the university rubric you've seen before. I won't dwell on that. There's more detail for both in the appendix for these slides. When we talk about the projects submitted, there were 16 total. All of the projects submitted do get included in the agency request budget as a standard practice. The total will be just under $800 million in state-supported bonds, and the total deferred maintenance will be roughly $280 million if all of the projects were funded. For the community colleges, we received only 2 projects, and that's because of the limitations. The colleges are allowed to have only 1 project per college awaiting matching funding, Right now, if memory serves, there are 11 projects awaiting matching for the colleges. So we only got 2 projects, and that was expected. That's not a surprise. And you can see both are laid out here, an academic center for Clackamas Community College, and a similar project, a renovation project for the good folks at Mount Hood. And then for the public university projects, which is the bulk of the projects submitted, many of these projects do focus on improvement and replacement work, focusing on student success, creative thinking, resiliency. I do have one correction on this chart. The second to last sentence under the section that says focus on student success, it says one project is a heat plant demolition. That is not correct. That's a heat plant renovation project or a repurpose project. But all of the university projects submitted include 188 million in institutional matching and would eliminate 264 million in deferred maintenance. And this is the priority list for all concerned. Our number one priority, like it has been in the past, is for capital improvement and renewal, or CIR funding. That program supports critical deferred maintenance needs, safety needs, security needs, ADA projects, any safety violation issues, code violation issues. So that program benefits all 7 of the universities and is allocated to all 7 of them based on 2 components, gross EAG square foot and a density factor. But we are recommending 120 million for that in the next biennium. You'll note here at the very top, the Center for the Performing Arts project, which you heard Jason Franklin talk about this morning from PSU, or earlier this afternoon, apologies. We did not rank that project due to its uncommon complexities. And you heard Jason talk a little bit about that project. And there's a docket item 3.6B, that gives you, it's just a 2-page handout that gives you a little bit more information about that project. It is an estimated $615 million project. It is one of 3 finalists. This is the replacement of the Keller Auditorium in the city of Portland. And ultimately, the city of Portland City Council will have to decide later this summer on which of the 3 finalists that they'll choose. This is one of the 3 finalists, and so more information on that project in your materials. The rest of the list, the total would be $662.4 million. And we do have, I seem to be going backwards here. Okay, we do have 2 Article 11 F-bond projects. These are self-funded projects. One, of course, as Dana mentioned earlier, is part of the Performing Arts project at PSU. And then also PSU wants to build some housing on their campus for $85 million. And so we did in November, this last November, commit to providing you a little bit of additional information and context around OSU Cascades. We had a great visit with them. They took us on a tour of all the land remediation work that they're currently doing. I will tell you, if you haven't been to OSU Cascades campus recently in the last at least in the last 6-8 months, go take a visit. A lot of work being done as they remediate the old construction landfill. But we learned that to date, about $210 million has been spent on capital construction work, about $100 million of that coming from the state. Their current request, as you heard Captain Odenthal earlier talk about, is an $84 million request, of which that includes $22 million for land remediation, and there's a healthy dose of the funding that will come from the Student Health and Rec Center fee. That fee, as I understand it, has been in place for 3 years now. So students have been paying that fee for the last 3 years, and that balance has been accruing in an account that will be used for matching purposes. It's important to note on the right-hand side, additional context, the current OSU 2030 strategic plan calls for an enrollment at the Cascades campus of 2,200 students. They currently have about 1,300, so that implies an annual growth of around 7% compared to historical annual growth of 4% or thereabouts. Their current request provides the capital footprint they believe that they need for that 2030 strategic plan. There are some caveats. They do need additional housing in the Bend area. Housing affordability, of course, like many parts of our state, is a challenge there. And they do have some research needs to support local industry partners in the area, specifically wet research lab space, which I won't get into any more details on that. But they do, in talking to OSU Cascades leadership, they do expect their next request after this one to be in the 2031-33 biennium. It'll be an academic building request at that point, based on enrollment and program offerings. And we do have a note that the total land remediation work, again, in the four planned phases, will cost a total of $100 million. The original campus cost, let me see, they spent $5 million to purchase 10 acres. They spent $8 million on the pumice mine. So, and then they spent $1 purchasing the land, the landfill. So $100 million total land remediation work. But if you saw the scope and scale of that work, you'll likely understand the need for that. So I'll pause there, and that is the list of capital projects that we plan to include in the ARB. Again, in the appendices, you'll just see a little bit more information on the rubric for each component, for your awareness.
Thank you, Jim. Questions? Commissioner Devlin.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. Just so you know, it's not that uncommon. To build on top of a landfill is somewhat uncommon if it's a regular landfill. It takes quite a while. But if you are ever familiar with the Bridgeport shopping facility, the outdoor facility up here, it's built on a construction landfill. It used to be a giant hole in the ground, actually.
Mr. Chair, if I can just piggyback on that for 30 seconds.
Go for it.
100% construction landfill. They're pulling out a lot of wood debris and a lot of tires. And I asked that question on campus, chemical issues, other issues. They said, surprisingly, no. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a shredder on campus, shred all that old wood debris. It's old construction debris. And they're going to shred it and use it as landfill on a different section and build the intramural fields on top of it. So a great use a great reuse of the space there. So they're not taking that landfill and moving it to another landfill. They're going to reuse on site, which I thought was pretty creative and pretty well oriented to LEED certifications should they choose to seek it.
Other questions? Jim, I have a quick one, more technical. Assuming we did go forward with the Performing Arts Center with Portland State University, do you know who would own the building?
My understanding is that it would, and I forget the expression. It's a commercial condominium ownership arrangement, very much like the Vanport building on PSU campus. And so in a commercial condominium arrangement, you have multiple owners. It's essentially a partnership, and they set up an HOA. And so PSU would be one of the owners. I assume the city of Portland would be another, and then the name of the arts organization in the city of Portland, I think, would be another owner. So you would have essentially multiple owners with a portion of essentially what is an HOA.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Makes sense. Any other questions for Jim on capital? Great. Jim, thanks so much. Appreciate the detailed information. We'll move on to Pathway Initiative with Donna Llewellyn. Hi, Donna.
Good. Hi, Chairs Rowan Heyman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Donna Llewellyn. I'm the Director of the Office of Community Colleges and Workforce Development. I'm here today to briefly touch on what serves as sort of a placeholder for potential recommendations that are anticipated to come out of the work group that was established in the 2024 short session regarding co-requisite remediation. The work group is focused on reviewing proven remedial education models that have proven track records for showing drastic increases in success. I'm happy to say that that group is meeting. They met, in fact, earlier today. The policy option package is not one that is included within the 1% cap from the governor. The funding that had originally been suggested would have been to support professional development and technical assistance at the colleges, along with a staff member to support the efforts related to implementation and professional development. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Veronica Dujon, who can talk to you a little bit about the transfer portal.
Great. Good afternoon, Veronica.
Good afternoon, Chair Heyman, members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Veronica Dujon, and I'm the Director for Academic Policy and Authorization at the HECC. And I would also observe that the transfer portal was not approved for inclusion in the 1% of CSL, but I will talk a little bit about what it is intended to do. The intent is really to build on the planning work that has already been done and was funded by the legislature in a previous cycle. And as the work has progressed with transfer, it has become very apparent that increasing support for coordination and technical assistance would be really critical to ensure equitable, efficient, and seamless post-secondary transfer pathways for the students engaged here. The funding, that portal, as we're calling it for now, is really intended to be a centralized, transparent, and interactive site where students, counselors, advisors can easily access how credits transfer, get information about common cost numbers. They can see how credits relate to their program requirements. They would also see some information about credit pathways and credit paths. I would observe that as we were doing this work and the planning work, we did consult with other states that have similar type arrangements or similar type services available. And so in the planning work that has been done, there have been, development of some recommendations following focus groups with students, staff, and administrators at the institutions. What we do have here is an opportunity to really enhance the value of the transfer work being done right now by the Transfer Council and our institutions by expanding its accessibility, currency, and utility for the population of different people who would be using it. The ask is to fund 3 additional HECC staff to provide the logistics and coordination for the program, and also to create a grant fund for institutions to provide faculty stipends to facilitate the work, or faculty stipends participating in the work, and also to provide funding to complete the work of whatever that portal or transfer platform would look like. And with that, I am happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions for Veronica or Donna? Well, I don't even have any. Thank you for your continued work. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Executive Director Cannon, I believe it's back to you.
Yeah, and really, I'm glad we've got a few minutes left before 4 o'clock. Not because I want to spend very much time talking, but rather to give you the opportunity. You've heard a lot of information. I kicked off this section of the agenda by noting that this is a really important meeting of the subcommittee, and part of that, of course, is for you to receive really the final information related to all of the proposals that our staff have been working on and some of the data and information that our partners have provided related to their institutional needs. And this is now the subcommittee's opportunity to provide any perspective, feedback that could help inform how we move forward with the agency request budget. Again, given the parameters that the governor has provided, including that application of the 1% cap and the provisional approval of items within it, but also related to the overall kind of presentation and narrative or commentary associated with this budget. And, I think we heard some of that from Commissioner Devlin earlier as it related to the support funds and the characterization of what the CSL budget would mean for who and how institutions, public universities in Oregon are funded. But I welcome at this point other comments, reflections, or questions. Of course, I think we continue to have the staff on the line here and can respond to any of that may arise. So back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Questions?
Mr.
Summarizing
Chair.
all of this. Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
I obviously do not know if my comments reflect the views of other members of the subcommittee, but personally, I would hope to see some alternatives proposed to the full HECC rather than just a simple alternative, and actually some clear language indicating what the impacts might be of those recommendations. Also, I think in communications to both you and the chair of the commission, I indicated that perhaps, I don't know if it would be necessary, but maybe another short, sometime in maybe July, early July, some short meeting of this subcommittee just to review a little bit more of that. Because I mean, we had a lot of information today to digest, and I do think it would be beneficial. I know we'll probably have some sidebar discussions in the meantime, but I would like to see some alternatives proposed and actually some clear language about the implications are of various proposals.
Thank you. Chair Rowe.
Thank you. Ben, you mentioned at the beginning, and this relates to what Commissioner Devlin was asking, but you mentioned communication with that will potentially be paired along with the ARB going to the governor's office, but also in that, and then several times during this presentation, you talked about conferring with the governor's office and sort of the narrow band we're in terms of latitude and the tensions that produces. I'm wondering if you anticipate any more opportunity for communicating with the governor's office before it comes back to us in August or before we are drafting a letter. And I guess I think I'm asking you to describe in even more detail just how narrow this pathway is, and if there's any place you see additional opportunity for requesting more funding.
Yeah, thanks. I think as it relates to the formal submission of the agency request budget, I believe that the 1% cap applies strictly to, the governor expects us to hew strictly to that 1% limitation. I think there is a sort of possible exception that we've been working with her staff on as it relates to a potential behavioral health initiative, but that's really being developed under her auspices. It may not even be reflected in our agency request budget. You haven't seen it even on this list. It may appear at the governor's request budget level as it is aligned with one of her priority areas. So there's some opportunity there Jennifer mentioned the ongoing conversation about Future Ready Oregon and the way in which the governor may support some inclusion of a general fund request within the ARB. It's not clear whether that would need to come within the 31 million and therefore really at the expense of Oregon Opportunity Grant dollars or potentially the modernization project or early learning professionals grant funding, or whether it could be treated as, you know, something, an exception or allowance above the 31 million. But I think my main point is that my understanding and expectation is that the 1% cap is quite firm and set at this point. I do, as I indicated at the outset, I think the governor's staff has indicated their desire to hear from the commission if the commission believes strongly that the kind of provisional approval of 3 items within that $31 million general fund cap, if the governor and her staff got that wrong, or the commission would like them to look at what should be included within the 31 million quite differently, I think there is an opportunity over the next couple of weeks to go back to them with that information and perspective of the commission. And so I think there is some room there. And as I indicated, I think they appreciate or at least understand that the commission is likely to weigh in about, to Commissioner Devlin's point, kind of the impacts of that of a budget that does contain only 1% new resources.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. I think also, as I think hypothetically about the accompanying document, yes, we want to certainly list the impacts, but I also think if there's room either before that or in that to distinguish our agency from other agencies. I don't know if we're unique in terms of our role on funding something as important as higher education and other institutions as opposed to our own operating funds. I'm just not familiar enough with every single agency that falls in this budget request. But I do think to the extent we are a different bird, we ought to really rely on that and explain that. So I think I'm looking for, at whatever time, both pushback against the process and the limitation as well as the result. So I don't want to give up trying to get us in a different category with whatever portion of it that we can, knowing that's uphill. And really appreciating, I've really appreciated the staff during all these presentations and realizing the amount of work and dedication that has to go into putting together a budget that none of us like. And they really show their professionalism and creativity in dealing with this. But let's accompany it with all of the passion and facts that we can that might change the picture, any at all. But our thanks to them very much, and to you.
Well stated, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Devlin.
If I get a clarification from the executive director, within that communication to the governor in this budget, we could also clearly indicate if we believe there are significant negative ramifications of using DAS's computation of CSL.
Yeah, again, I think far be it for me to put parameters around that communication. I agree that it is an option for the commission to explain where it believes that CSL falls short of capturing the true need of continuing current services at the institutions. And in fact, that has been a part of, as you know, prior budget requests from the HECC have been policy option packages that have exceeded this year's 1%, that tried to express to the governor and the legislature the true need, or the base funding amount that we have determined we believe is necessary in order to maintain current services. And I think that very much could be a portion of that, could be reflected within that letter.
Okay.
Great. Other comments or questions? Okay. Ben, I would hope that, and I think this is assumed, but I just want to make sure that in this sort of additional communication that would accompany our budget request as directed by the governor, that we would do something that looks similar to what we have done in the past, which is an honest representation of what we believe financial needs of our higher education institutions actually are for the next biennium. So it's not as bold perhaps as an alternate budget, but certainly a financial representation of what I think is our statutory duty, which is to represent that real need. And so I'd like to see that included. Perhaps Chair Rowe, this is not the prerogative of the F&A committee to provide this kind of directive, but perhaps in our meeting tomorrow or somewhere, we could talk about how we would, what this looks like and how we would participate in developing that. So.
Yes, thanks. We can, Chairman Heyman, and I think if you, the place for discussing it would be in your report, and if we just make sure we have the key points you would like me to make in that letter, or the direction at least, then we'll take it from there and get a draft.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other comments, questions, illuminations, wisdom? Yes, Commissioner Simon.
I raised my hand before I realized you were saying illuminations and wisdom, because that is
It's
not
okay.
at all
No.
what I'm offering. It's mostly just a comment. This is a lot of information to process. It's even though I knew the situation was coming, where we would be faced with what feels like a very difficult budget to get behind. So I'm feeling a lot of concerns, but I also wanted to express my appreciation both to staff who have presented given such detailed I'm losing words. Reports, that's the word, reports. But also to my fellow commissioners who I think have offered really great suggestions for how we might move forward and have some discussions to really reflect the true need of higher education in the state and its importance. So that's, I don't know, not illumination, not wisdom, but a comment about this important work.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated.
If I may, and perhaps as you, Vice Chair Heyman and Chair Rowe are thinking about the sort of guidance on the development of a letter or some supplementary document, I appreciate the perspective that you shared. I think, I tried in my framing comments to reflect what I think is the governor's very sincere and appropriate effort to engage agencies, and in this case, a commission, in a exercise of that typically only the governor and the legislature really have to deal with, which is how to set priorities within highly constrained fiscal environments, right? And, again, ordinarily, every other cycle that I've been involved with the commission, at this point, we would be discussing a very aspirational budget request, probably very closely aligned, much more closely aligned with the needs and the strategic plan and the goals of the state. But without this, the sort of discipline that a balanced budget requirement imposes on the legislature and the governor. And so I hope that in the communication that you offer in August, there will be some acknowledgement of that and of the fact that what the governor is attempting to do here is engage agencies and commissions in the very hard work that we're typically not involved in, of setting priorities within a highly constrained fiscal environment. And again, I think that's very challenge. That I feel that, certainly you all feel that, as it is an extraordinary challenge, and frankly, it can be a frustrating one. But it is the reality of state budgeting in a balanced budget context. So I agree with and certainly support the direction that is emerging out of this subcommittee, and think it is consistent with the role that the HECC was designed to play, to advocate and to identify the resource needs and advocate for them. And I think appreciation for balancing that with an appreciation for the governor and the legislature's ultimate responsibility here, which is to look, of course, not just at higher ed, but across the state enterprise as a whole, and to look at available resources, revenues, and write a balanced budget. And with former co-chair Devlin on the line, I don't need to say anything more about that. That was his job for a decade, but it is a very, very challenging one, and we've been sort of given a glimpse of that through this process.
We can advocate and appreciate at the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
We will do both, but it's also a case of where the governor's priorities are, and hoping with the governor and the legislature that we have evidence to raise the priority of higher education in the whole scheme of things, even within a constrained budget. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
I think even with a constrained budget, there are choices to be made, and the scrutiny should be broad. I got to be very careful what I say here, but sometimes budget problems are created by overcommitting in some areas that are causing you problems in coming bienniums. That's why I think I and a lot of others were reluctant to make long-term commitments without understanding the implications of them. So, and I think the governor understands that, and that's part of the pressure I think she's facing, is that the legislature has made a lot of commitments and the resources are not necessarily available to keep all of those commitments. The one thing I would like to state, though, to give Ben a little bit of credit here, I remember telling state agencies in 2011, tell us we were in desperate budget, most desperate we've ever been. In 9/11, they had extra federal dollars. They had tobacco settlement. We had that was all gone by 11/13. Our revenues were still down. We asked agencies to tell us the absolute minimum they could get by with, and then we cut it by 3.5%. And then told them that we would restore it if things got better in the next year, and they didn't get that much better, so we only restored a modest portion of it. And the state could face the same situation anytime in the future, so hopefully nothing like that again. So we have much more significant reserves now than we had at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I will, thanks, Chair, and I know we want to let you close this subcommittee meeting, Co-Chair Heyman, but I will note that I think what is known to most or all of you, and that we've touched on in the past, but what really, when you look at the macro budget environment, and a lot of what you're seeing here actually in terms of HECC requests or potential requests, including Future Ready Oregon, reflects the challenge of shifting away from one-time funding that came through during the pandemic era, including federal ARPA funding, COVID relief funding, et cetera. And so that's happening across state government, and some of the places. So our requests on this list, some of them are mirrored by a bunch of other agencies that are in similar situations where they're trying to figure out how to continue programs that were started or are enhanced with one-time funding. And so while we're not in a recessionary environment, we're not seeing state revenue contractions or anything like it. It's actually a fairly healthy fiscal forecast. And as the co-chair, or as Commissioner Devlin noted, We've got better state reserves than we ever have had. We are facing a bit of something of a cliff with respect to one-time funding, and that is reflected in this overall kind of challenge of 1%.
Thank you. Anything else? I want to remind us we have a full commission meeting tomorrow starting at 9 a.m. If you are able, please attend in person. If not, we understand. But just want to make sure all aware of that. This meeting is adjourned.
Guthrie, can you stay on the line for a moment?
Who?
Absolutely, Commissioner.
Okay.
Technical question.